Stop with your green scam. You are lying to the people. Nobody is saving the planet here. While you are banning normal cars with combustion engines for ordinary citizens of the European Union and making their lives more expensive with new taxes and emission permits, even for the households, some overpopulated countries somewhere in Asia, like India or Malaysia, are filling the oceans with endless amounts of plastic waste every day. The only things you care about is how to gain more control over the people's lives, is how to gain more power, and of course, how to make more money. You are enriching yourselves at the expense of taxpayers' hard work and selling them fake idea about saving the planet. But majority of people in the European Union, they do not want to get rid of the fossil fuels. They do not want to pay for your social and ideological experiments. And that's why the only real conclusion of any climate conference should be that there will be no climate conferences in the future until the EU officials will not come to the common sense again.
If you don't want asylum seekers and refugees in these European countries, then don't create wars in those countries.
When these people come in, the expectation for my country, and the expectation for any country, I would imagine, for everyone to come in, is that on net, you're going to benefit the country in a variety of ways. I don't think that that same expectation should be levied, though, towards people that are seeking asylum or for people that are fleeing disaster.
The point is, it's about who gets to benefit. That's really the bottom line, isn't it? If Europeans get to benefit, it's okay, no problem. There's no questions asked. You can even build settlements. No problem. You can even steal someone's home. But if you're someone coming into the UK, no, there's a discussion about expectations now, actually. You're seeking asylum, are you? What do you mean seeking asylum? You created these wars. You bombed these people. They're running for their life. And now, before you come in, tell us what you're going to bring to the table. Is this a joke? Is this some kind of is this satire? This is pathetic, frankly. No argument has been given. We are here because they were there. That's the reality of the situation. Prevention is better than cure. Don't create a disaster and then ask, why is it happening? You created it with your own hands.
Europe's not preparing for war. It's preparing for collapse. Let's be honest. And let's stop pretending this is about defending democracy, because it's not. France, Germany, the UK, these elites aren't gearing up for war with Russia because they care about freedom. They're doing it because their grip on power is slipping, and fast. Their economies are breaking. The middle class is crushed. People can't afford rent, food, or heating. Yet instead of helping, they're dumping billions into weapons. And now they're panicking. They sanctioned Hungary, a full EU member, because Orban refused to send more money to Ukraine, a country that isn't even in the EU. Let that sink in for a second. They punished a sovereign member state for not funding a foreign war. That's how desperate they are to keep this agenda alive. Meanwhile, Slovakia is breaking rank, Poland's pushing back, the AfD is rising in Germany, and in France are doing everything to stop Marine Le Pen because the people support them and the elites can't stand it. So what do? They call them extremists. They smear them. They arrest them. They try to erase them from history. Why? Because these are the voices of the people, and that terrifies the establishment. So they fall back on the oldest trick in the book: crank up the fear, blame Russia, push for war to cover for their own failures. But the threat isn't coming from Moscow, my friends. It's coming from within, from the millions of people across Europe and the US who are done being lied to, used, and ignored. And yeah, it's happening in America too. The media repeats the same script every day, and Trump, he's the one punching holes straight through it. So what do? Well, we don't scream, we don't riot, we speak the truth. We ask the right questions, and we stop playing along. Because when enough of us refuse to lie, the machine breaks. And you know what? They know it.
Akende has said it. It's important to historicize this. I mean, I come back to this argument from Walter Rodney. It is almost disingenuous to suggest that the fact that there is good infrastructure and roads and social services in Western Europe and North America is the product of their intelligence and hard work. I mean, of course, they were intelligent and hardworking people, but really, we have to understand the development of these countries as the product of the exploitation of the global South, not just in Africa. But I think this is really important.
Who built their railways?
Who built the railways? The thing that everyone in the West thinks that World War II was won by the Americans. Firstly, that's not true. I mean, it was basically Russia and China that ultimately defeated fascism. But let's ignore that part. The fact that the uranium that was dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki to build the atom bomb that was dropped in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which destroyed so many lives, was taken out of the Democratic Republic of the Congo. That's where that uranium comes from. To go and not just plunder the African continent, to take that and use it to go and dominate another part of the world is an anecdote of the kind of development that we are talking about. So first point is that we have to be historical about this. But the second point also is that we have to be a little more theoretical about understanding what the reality at the moment is. And I'll use the example, you mentioned it in passing, that we should be grateful that we can send our young people to go and study in these countries. Kids are going to the global north to go to universities in Oxford and Harvard and whatever. Any country's education system is not something that exists in a bubble. You create an education system for the kind of society that you are trying to create. In 1976, in the country that I'm from, in South Africa, young students from from schools went onto a strike. And they went and they kind of created, it was a kind of a youth uprising. Why was there an uprising? Because the apartheid economy was structured in such a way that black African children were being educated to push wheelbarrows and work with spades. Our currency is the rand. For every rand that was spent on a white child, 20 cents was spent on a black child. Because the kind of, it was called Bantu education, different education system for the working class they were trying to create. What's the point I'm trying to make? The point is that an education system is there to create the kinds of people that you need in your country, in your society, in the future. It's about constructing your future. And unfortunately, neocolonialism has condemned many parts of the African continent to not develop in the future, which means that we don't have educations. Where are the universities where you can go and get a PhD in engineering in the African continent? The copper belt might have the highest proportion of copper in the world, and it has the lowest proportion of engineers, I'm sure. There's a part in South Africa, 96% of the world's platinum reserves are in this little platinum belt in South Africa. But above there are people living, they don't have flushing toilets, and their children can't go to school. What kind of contradiction is this? It's because you're creating the conditions where you want Africa to forever be the feeding trough of the imperialist countries. And this, I think, is the thing we have to understand a bit better. And it's not, I used education as an example, but it applies at all levels. We have to have the correct assessment of what's wrong here. Is corruption because the darker your skin is, the more likely it is that you are going to steal money? Or is it how the entire system is set up? I, for one, refuse to believe that the color of your skin determines the degree to which you are going to be corrupt or not. I do not believe that people are so ontologically different, but I do think that there is a kind of structure that has been imposed onto the African continent, which the African people, the working people of the world, the global south has never benefited from truly. And that is, I think, what we need to fight against and understand and identify as the true enemy, rather than the kind of purportedly lazy Africans, which is what it seems to be your American friends are telling us, viewers.
The system wasn't built for you to win. You went to school to memorize facts you never use. You were trained to raise your hand, wait your turn, and follow instructions. Then they told you, get a job, work 40 hours a week, give half of it to tax, retire at 67 if you're lucky. That's not a life. That's a script. And most people don't question it because they're too tired from living it. But once you see it, you can't unsee it. That's when you realize freedom was never going to be handed to you. You have to build it. And that's why I teach digital products, because ownership is the only way out. No boss, no begging, no clocking. You move different when you know the system was never designed to serve you. It was designed to use you.
Hello, Africa. Welcome back to Neo Africa, where we tell the African stories how it is. No shortcuts, no bagging. We are just saying it as it is. Now, Africa has said no more. Africa said no more. And when Africa said no more, we are seeing Europe countries are falling down. We are seeing France is going bankrupt. As the youth of Africa, automatically what Africa means to the world. Africa is power. Africa is power. And that's what I'm talking about today. But before I continue, I want you to watch this clip first.
Something big is happening. Something civilizational is happening. It seems abundantly clear to me that the criticisms being made of Europe, don't get me wrong, I love Europe. I haven't been in it for quite a while, but I love it. I miss it. Europe is a wonderful place to live, or at least was a wonderful place to live, and is now only a wonderful place to live if you have the means to live a very different life from the great majority of your compatriots or your fellow denizens, residents of European countries. It's a great pain for me to see the decline, maybe even the demise of Europe. Europe is not what it was in every single respect that you care to mention. It's not having ruled the roost in the world for close on 500 years, having conquered all of the rest of the world at one time or another, from Portugal to Britain. The empires that were launched from Europe conquered all before them and ruled much longer than the Roman Empire itself. But the civilizational death, the strange death, has not been from without. Nobody attacked us. Nobody invaded us. We cannot blame an external actor for this civilizational decline, for this near-death experience that we are now in. This was all our own doing.
I mean, to make it concrete, take 5 countries that we think of ourselves as comparable to. So like France, Germany, the Netherlands from Europe, but then add Canada and Australia, which I think British people generally think are poorer than us or the same as us. They're now way richer than us. Take those 5, those are all richer than us and all more equal than us, okay? If we had the same GDP per capita and the same inequality as them, then the typical British household would be £8,800 better off, okay? That is why it feels like a catastrophe, because we're paying the same gas prices as them because these are traded products, yeah? So when everyone says, oh, it doesn't matter if Britain just gets poor, we've still got to pay global prices for stuff, I'm afraid. So it really matters, and that is what economic failure looks like over decades.
The African Union is set to become a permanent member of G20, which would give the continental body of 55 African states the same status as the European Union. But you have to ask yourself, why now? Look, with the expansion of BRICS, it has finally dawned on the colonial West that Africans have an alternative to the classic Western-led world order, and they are desperate to rein Africans back into the neo-colonial power sphere. For what feels like eternity, Africans weren't treated like equal partners, and instead any relationship was built on the foundation of subjugation and control. But with the facade of Western dominance cracking and new alliances forming, Africa's might can no longer be undermined. It's finally time for the world's most important continent to step up to the plate and redefine its destiny. It's easy to be fooled by Western promises of seemingly altruistic equality and partnership, especially after getting a seat at the table, isn't it? But never forget what they did to you and milk this cow for what it's worth. But ultimately, I want to know your opinion. Will joining the G20 benefit Africa? Let me know in the comments, and I want to wish you all the best.
Africa, if you add up the 55 countries of the African Union, that's about 1.5 billion people, same size as India, same size as China. The big difference is that the imperial powers divided Africa into 55 little countries, not one of which can thrive on its own. Whereas India and China, because of the history, remained unified countries.
Do you think this will change in the future? They will unite?
They have to. So I tell them every single time I have the opportunity that the African Union is the key. As 55, you can't make it. But as one African continental economy, you can make it. So what's happening now is Africa's population is continuing to rise. It's the only place in the world with rapid population growth.
And all the others are declining.
Everyone else has peaked or just about to peak or actually beginning a decline. Africa's population today is 1.5 billion. By 2050, it'll be 2.5 billion. That's a lot, adding 1 billion people in the next quarter century. What do I say to African leaders every time I have the chance? First, be Africa-wide. Second, get on quickly with mass education because that is the key to the economic development. Third, look at what China did. Follow that model.
Only if the African people can come together, starting now in West Africa, and tell, in this case, the colonial power France, to get the hell out, to keep your paltry development aid, to forget about the idea that you can power yourself at our expense while we live in darkness and penury. You live as a superpower, as a nuclear armed superpower with veto, vote and power in the United Nations. While we remain poor, you are rich. Forget about that. If the African people of West Africa can come together and at least say that, you will have struck a blow for all of the people of all of the tribes of West Africa. Think about that. Because the real division in the world, I promise you, it's not between the Igbos and others in Nigeria. The real division in the world is between the haves and the have-nots.
Now, welcome. Let's get something straight here. Africa did not wake up just one day angry, but Africa woke up aware. We are aware of what's happening, and we know. We are aware that French currency systems were not empowering Africa. We are aware that French troops were not protecting Africans. We are aware that French aid was not developing Africa. It was just controlling Africa. You see countries like Mali, countries like Burkina Faso and Niger, they did something unthinkable. They looked directly in the eyes of the French and said, pack up, leave, we are done. There's no begging, there's no negotiating, there's no fear. And that alone should tell you something changed. Now, let me explain something many people don't understand here. French global identity is tied to Africa because without Africa, France is not globally military power. Without Africa, France is not dominant energy player. Without Africa, France is not culturally influential at scale. And Africa was not a partner. Africa was France's leverage. You get that? Africa was France's leverage. Now, talking on that, Africa was not just when Africa walked away, when they said no to France, France didn't just lose territory. France have lost relevance, and that's why the reaction was emotional. That's why the reaction of French people is emotional. That's why they are going bankrupt. That's why the threats are coming. Now, let me talk about the elephant in the room. The CFA franc. This is the elephant in the room. A currency system where African nations deposit reserve in France. A currency system where Africans' economies are tied to Paris. African leaders cannot fully control their own money. And family, imagine working your whole life, but someone else controls your bank account. God damn it, that is a fucking lie. I cannot do that. I don't know how Africa managed to do that. When African nations begin discussing currency reform, when African nations begin discussing regional alternative, when African nations begin discussing emotional independence, France panicked. Europe countries are panicking. Why are they panicking? Because once Africa controls its money, then like CFA franc loses its invisible income. France loses its invisible income stream. I'm talking about France because France is the one of this country that put everything to Africa. They were getting every dime from Africa. Because while Africa is rising right now, France is dealing with the pension crisis. France is dealing with mass protests, with rising debt, with declining influence. And no, Africa did not cause this. But Africa just exposed it how it is. Because for decades, Africa helped cushion France's economic weakness. They helped with cheap resources, stable currency inflows, and geopolitical leverage. So when the bottom cushion disappeared, then France had to face reality. And France is facing reality in real time because they ate a lot from Africa. They ate a lot from Western countries. I don't know why some African countries are like, okay, these are good people, but they know They know how bad it is. They know how these countries, being here in Africa, is just eating all we have. Imagine a miner or a farmer, just a farmer somewhere in Ghana, farming his cocoa, and he's selling the cocoa maybe at $2 per kg. And then he bought it back at $100 per kg. That is theft in broad daylight. It is theft in broad daylight. Africa did not drain France, but just Africa subsidized France. Africa uranium-powered French cities. African labor built French wealth. African obedience maintained French status. And when Africa said we will no longer do this for free, France felt it because they want everything for free. They want everything for free. And the most dangerous thing Africa did was not political, it was psychological, because Africa showed to the world that you can say no, you can survive sanctions, and you can reject former colonizers. And that's what we need to do in all of the African countries. Because once you say no, others start thinking. And let me tell you, the most expensive answer, it is no. The most respected answer, it is no. You say no and you move on. No is one of the things that a lot of leaders in Africa need to learn. Just saying no to this shit that is happening out here. The Europe countries are now begging. They are now threatening. They are now doing all sorts of things to come back to African countries that have said no. To come back to West Africa. To come back to Burkina Faso. They are threatening they want to destabilize the country so that they find ways to come back. They want to impeach, or they are staging coups so that just to come back. They are doing everything, every weekly or wicked shit just to come back. But African youth, we need to rise up. We need to rise up and we need to protect those leaders we see they are taking us somewhere. Now, tell me what you think in the comment section about this video. Until next episode, peace out.